Hey everybody, it's Mike and welcome to Chip Damage. And if you have seen the news last night, you know what we're going to be talking about today. Today, we're going to be talking about the news that has most of the gaming world and particularly the fighting game community reeling in shock, I would say. Now, if you've seen any of my prior videos, whether it be on collecting or just where we chat about games, you know I'm a huge fighting game fan. Like a quarter of my entire gaming collection is just fighting games, whether they be big, small, obscure, weird, good, bad. I love me some fighting games. I grew up playing them. They've been like kind of ingrained in my gaming DNA. Like there's just a certain appeal to them, all the wacky characters that I just love and can't get away from. And last night we got an announcement for the next installment and the granddaddy of them all, the biggest fighting franchise in terms of, I guess, IP in the world, the next Street Fighter. Yes, we got an announcement for Street Fighter 6, and everyone, and myself included, is super hyped about it. And you know what? I want to talk about it. I want to talk about what my thoughts are on the announcement, how the announcement was made, what we saw, and what I'd like to see in this next game, because this is big. It has been 6 years since Street Fighter 5 has launched back in February of 2016. Geez, that's a long time. And there's a lot of hopes up in the air because you know what? Street Fighter is very beloved, but you know, there was a lot of, I'd say, controversy with Street Fighter 5 and Capcom in general over the last decade, that especially within the fighting game kind of community and department and development. And things have changed since the launch of that game. So let's go over what was announced, because it wasn't just Street Fighter 5. We got another lovely title announced last night. We're going to go through that. We're going to talk about what I want to see in Street Fighter 5 in Street Fighter 6 and what I want them to avoid that Street Fighter 5 did. And of course, when I'm done, I want you guys to comment. Let me know. Did you see this announcement? Are you hyped? I mean, it was a quick teaser. Did you think nothing of it? Do you need to wait to see more? What do you want to see? What do you hope not to see? And what do you want to see from Street Fighter and Capcom in particular moving forward? And I would love all your input, and I'll get back and comment on it as soon as I possibly can, because this is a topic that really gets my blood boiling, if you couldn't tell. So without further ado, please get the YouTube stuff out of the way. If you like what I'm about to say, please like and subscribe, and let's jump into it, shall we? Yes, well, let's begin. Last night after the Capcom fight, after a few fantastic matches from some of the best Street Fighter 5 players in the world, we got two game announcements from Capcom. Yes, there was a countdown going for the last week or so on Capcom.com. It was an ominous black screen with white numbers sticking down until midnight of last night, February 20th, going into February 21st. And there was a lot of rumors about what this countdown was kind of heralding. I mean, the font of the kind of website, the general vibe, the black background with the white lettering kind of implied that it would be Resident Evil 8 DLC, which is what I thought it would be, because we were promised Resident Evil 8 DLC like 6 months ago, and it's still not there. And, you know, but then as time went on, it was noticed that this countdown lined up with the end of the Capcom, of this tournament of the Capcom Cup. So most people were said, hey, this is going to be a fighting game announcement. And what else are they going to announce? Other than Street Fighter 6, especially with the latest Street Fighter 5 character being dropped a few months ago, Luke, who is said to be kind of a big deal for the next Street Fighter, which would be Street Fighter 6. Like, Street Fighter 5 is essentially content complete. And I'm willing to do another video where I kind of talk about the winding road of Street Fighter 5, because it has been winding. So it was perfect timing to drop Street Fighter 6, and that's what happened. We got a brief teaser of Street Fighter 6 where you see Ryu encased in darkness, looking a little older, kind of that infamous hot Ryu costume with the beard and the stubble, shirtless, facing off against Luke, the latest character, like I said, from Street Fighter 5. In a very quick kind of tussle-up, you get the logo and you get a black screen saying more information coming summer 2022. And that's all we got. But what I want to talk about first was the game that was announced preceding this, because we got another little surprise with that. Yes, it wasn't just Street Fighter 6. It wasn't just the new hotness. No, some of the old hotness got a little bit of love, and I love this. You know, I'm a game collector. I'm really into game preservation and people having access to as many of the classic titles as possible, because, you know, as time goes on, you know, newer, younger people get into these genres, get into games, and, you know, as a millennial and Gen Xers older, like, we have access, or we experienced gaming in its infancy, right? Like, gaming was still relatively new as we were growing up, and it's still relatively new. But there are new people jumping into games all the time who don't have access to that hardware, wasn't there when it was hot, and it would be expensive, hard to get, Hardware breaks down after a while. So I think it's great when older titles come back. And this collection, the Capcom Fighting Collection that was announced, is particularly special because it has something for both new and old fans in many, many ways. So what is this? What am I rambling about? Well, Capcom announced this Capcom Fighting Collection, much in line with their 30th anniversary collection of Street Fighter anniversary collection. This being the 35th anniversary of Street Fighter this year. It's very apt that they're following this up. And this collection was a collection of 12 Street Fighter games in their arcade versions put on one disc for all generations to enjoy. And this is somewhat of a follow-up to that. This is a collection of 10 classic Capcom games put on disc. It was announced for physical, being digital and physical for Xbox, PlayStation 4, and Steam and Switch, releasing June 24th for $40. And is a collection of 5 Darkstalkers games: Darkstalkers 1, Darkstalkers 2, Darkstalkers 3, which is Vampire Savior, and 2 Darkstalker games, which we never got here in the United States. I believe they were never released outside of Japan. That's Vampire Hunter 2 and Vampire Savior 2. And by the way, I just got to mention this. The official names for the Darkstalker games are impossible to remember because it's called Vampire over there and we call it Darkstalkers, but they use the name Darkstalkers in the titles. It's officially Darkstalkers 2 is Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge, and then Darkstalkers 3 in Japan is known as Vampire Savior. But that's not the version we got. It's insane. But essentially what we're getting are the 5 original versions of Darkstalkers. The last 2, which we never got in the United States, in their arcade versions in the U.S., and that's fantastic. Darkstalkers has a number of collections in the U.S., but they're getting quite old. There was a fantastic collection called the Chaos Tower on the PSP a number of years ago, and on the 360 and PS3, there was, of course, the Darkstalkers HD collection, but that's now 10 years old as well, and there was never a physical release for that in the United States, and only in Japan, and only on the PS3. So to have multiple physical releases of the entire Darkstalkers series, all 5 games as originally presented in arcade mode, which is what these seem to be. Some people aren't nuts about this, myself included, where the games included in these collections are kind of arcade perfect. They don't have any of the enhancements. Kind of a shame in some ways. In this prior collection I mentioned, the version of Third Strike on here is the bare bones arcade version. It is not the enhanced online edition that was released on PS3 and 360 that most people would prefer. But I see what they're going for. Capcom is going for more the OG, arcade version of the game, and considering how many games they're cramming onto one disc here, I get it. It's not ideal, but we're still getting 5 Darkstalkers games. And if you've never played Darkstalkers, people, let me tell you, fantastic series, dripping with style. That series, they don't make games this cool very often anymore. Anime, horror, movie monsters, Universal monsters, where you get to play as derivative anime versions of Dracula, vampires, werewolves, succubi, mummies. It's so cool. But with the moveset, kind of the framework of Street Fighter. A Street Fighter Alpha in particular has a very, everyone knows Morgan Sprite because it appeared in Marvel vs. Capcom vs. SNK for a million years. If you've ever wondered where Morgan and Felicia from Marvel vs. Capcom are from, this is the game, this is the series, and you're getting it in its entirety on this collection. Half this collection is Darkstalkers, and I think that's great. Darkstalkers has enough drip that it should be remembered for all time. They're never coming out with a brand new one. It's just not happening, people. But it will not be forgotten because we are getting a brand new set in this collection of all 5 games. But that's not what we're getting, obviously. That's only half the set. We're getting 5 Darkstalkers games. We're getting 5 more. The next one is kind of a standalone. That is Cyberbots Full Metal Madness. Now, if you don't know what this is, oh boy, this is a cool little 2D fighter from back in the day. Only way to play this in the U.S. in recent years was it was originally a Japanese PS1 classic on the PS3, and then it was released in the Capcom Arcade Collection that was released a little more than a year ago on multiple consoles like Switch, and then it came out later on PlayStation and Xbox. But it's kind of a hidden gem. It's a game where you essentially 2D fighter where you play as giant robots, mech styles, and big, big flashy battles. It is also the home game of Jin Satome, the guy with the exploding suit who summons a giant robot from Marvel vs. Capcom 2. If you didn't know where he's from Cyberbots. This game is insane. I've played a bit of this game myself, and there was a sequel to this game on or a spiritual sequel on this game on the Dreamcast as well. That's never been released in any way. shape or form, and it's still not in this collection, which is kind of a bummer. Like in general, there are no Dreamcast, there's no Power Stone, there's no Plasma Sword, there's no Techromancer being the pseudo sequel to Cyberbots. Like now it's just Cyberbots. There's no other games in the series, but still, you get to play as the game from my homeboy, my homeboy Jin Satome is from, and that's cool on its own. Very underrated 2D fighting game. However, the next game is very special in the collection that we're going to be talking about, and that is Red Earth, known as Warzard in Japan. Red Earth is a game that has never had a home release anywhere, and it was a arcade fighting game with like adventure mode elements, released in Japan and Capcom. It was, I believe, one of the first games that used the CPS-3 board. It's either that or JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I think it's Warzard, which is the Third Strike, the Street Fighter 3 engine. So it's very fluid 2D animations. This is the game where, if you've ever played Capcom Fighting Evolution, it's where like Hauser the T-Rex and Leo and Kenji the Ninja come from. Big, beautiful sprites, very Dungeons and Dragons with an anime kind of aesthetic layered on top of it. And it's just fantastic that we get to actually play this game in the United States for the first time for many of us. I've never actually played this game, so this one is going to be the only brand new title for me. And I think that that's fantastic because it's a gem. Really, it is. It's hidden. There weren't many Capcom CPS-3 games. It's basically like this, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and the 3 Third Strike games. There's probably 1 or 2 more hidden out there, but like it was a very underutilized engine. It has that super smooth 2D animation, so I'm down to play anything like that. I know that this game in particular is more of like an adventure game / fighting game where it's like you pick one of 4 characters and you fight through bosses with health bars, Hauser the T-Rex being one. So I don't know much about it. Like I've never watched a walkthrough of it or play it, but I know that it's cool that it's coming to the US for the first time. They didn't forget about it. But the next couple of games have been released in the US, but they're very cool nonetheless. Of course, there has to be a Street Fighter game on the Capcom Fighter Collection. We're getting Hyper Street Fighter 2. Now, if you don't know what this is, this was released on the PlayStation 2 in the Street Fighter Alpha Anthology back in 2004 or 2005. And what this is, it's kind of like a culmination of all the Street Fighter 2s. Like, you get to kind of pick, there's like a million versions of Street Fighter 2. It's like Street Fighter 2, then there's Championship Edition, then Hyper Fighting, then Super Street Fighter 2, and then Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. Like, you get to choose the version of the character from those versions. Like, you can be Sagat from Street Fighter Championship Edition or Sagat from like Super Street Fighter 2. It's kind of like a remix of all the Street Fighter 2s put together into one package. Very cool. Has been released in any form past that PS2 version in the United States since that time, almost more than 15 years ago. So it's cool that we're getting that. It's kind of like the definitive version of Street Fighter 2, arguably with Ultra Street Fighter 2 or HE Turbo Remix. They will never stop re-releasing Street Fighter 2. But this is a good one to throw in the set if you want to celebrate Street Fighter's 35th anniversary. Street Fighter 2 is the one that put it on the map, and this is kind of like the biggest version of it that you can play. Now, the next 2 games, I cannot believe that they're bringing back. I thought these games were long dead, and I'm so happy that they're bringing back. The first one being Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix. Now, Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix is something Capcom just wouldn't release today. It is a fighting game, totally unbalanced, made just for fun and just for laughs. You play as chibi characters from Capcom, mostly Street Fighter games, beating the tar out of each other with really elaborate, goofy, over-the-top moves in a beautiful 2D art style, just wailing on each other while you collect gems that fly out of the characters to kind of boost your moves. It's wacky, it's stupid, it's not exactly what you would call balanced, but it's loaded with Capcom references. It's an amazing game. It has been available since the PS1 and digitally downloadable on the PS3, but kind of a game that just isn't made anymore. Like, it's a goof game like that was just thrown out there, and Capcom doesn't really do like games are too expensive to make now, so like there's not many like this. They couldn't have expected this to sell well back in the day. It's like literally like as Chun-Li goes through her combos, she like changes costumes into various female Capcom characters like Jill from Resident Evil and shoots people with a gun. Dan has like a Tengu mask and like hits people with a statue of his father. It's just absurd. And games like this don't come around very often. I thought it was forgotten, and it is coming back in this collection. Keep your eye on this one if you've never played it. Look it up if you don't know. Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix. And the last game in the Capcom Fighting Collection isn't exactly a fighting game, but it's in line with it. And that is Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. If you don't know what this is, I'm not shocked, but also, how could you not? This is like the one puzzle game that Capcom brought out in the US that was like competitive and good. It's essentially like a Tetris Attack type game of stacking blocks, or Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, or Kirby's Avalanche, if you're familiar, where you select your character, a Capcom character, in the chibi style, much like, if not identical to, Super Puzzle Fighter Mini Mix, or Super Gem Fighter Mini Mix. And essentially you just drop blocks, and whoever can stack and do combos quicker than their opponent will win. And depending on what character you choose, the bonus you get when you stack blocks will be different. Like how you drop blocks on your opponent will be different. Very similar to whatever you want to call Puyo, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine, but with a Capcom flavor. Great game. It was released on the PS1, the Saturn, a very rare version that I actually am lucky enough to own, the Game Boy Advance. There was an HD version on the 360 and PS3 that stripped little bells and whistles that people really miss, like little background things. So I'm hoping that this version is like the more complete version with all the extra content. And I am very excited for all of these. And like I said, all of this is only $40. And it seems to be a more comprehensive collection than we're used to from getting from Capcom. It's going to have 500 pieces of art and rollback netcode for all 10 games. That's absurd. They put in netcode, they applied netcode to 10 games that, like, how many people are really going to hop on, like, Vampire Savior 2 and play online? It doesn't matter. You have the option now to go and play good online with that game. Me, Puzzle Fighter, and Gem Fighters Mini Mix all day. That is 10 separate classic games getting the modern treatment. And also unlockable music and art tracks, like I mentioned, from all throughout the series. This is a hell of a collection, and I will be picking this up day one. You know, as of this moment, as of right now, because I know what I'm getting, I'm actually more excited for this title than than Street Fighter 6, which we'll talk about more. Just because we don't know much about Street Fighter 6, like, it could get messed up. We'll talk about it. But like this is a solid package that I'm very excited to play, because you know what? I have some of these games in my collection, but it's hard to hook up the hardware and get them working right, and emulation isn't perfect for a lot of these games. So just to have it in a modern setting with trophies, with good online, with like a modern controller, and I can just pop it in my PS4, 5, Switch, whatever, and have it work for $40, I'm in. And it's physical, and they're doing a physical version. Can't beat that. The Capcom Fighter Collection is hype. What do you guys think about it? What games are you hyped for on playing in this collection? Do you care about that at all? Are you like, why are these old games cool to you? Ask me the question. I'll let you know if I can. But I want to know, what do you guys think of this sick little collection coming out June 24th? And with that, we got to talk about the big boy of the night, the buzz that's on the tip of everybody's tongue, Street Fighter 6. Boy, I'm divided on this. So let me get this out of the way. Street Fighter 5, as of now, as of February 2022, 6 years after its release, is a fantastic full-featured game. You know, if you want, you can look at it right here. The Champion Edition has almost all the content, pretty much everything up until the final season, the final 6 characters for Street Fighter 5. Right here, the $30. It's got 40 characters right on the disc. There's 46 total. You have to buy one more season. Tons of stages and unlockables and costumes. But let's talk about 2016, though. Let me take you back. February 8th, 2016. You know, I'm still playing Street Fighter 4 regularly with my friends at this time. Street Fighter 4, you know, if you don't remember, if you weren't playing the games at the time, really did revive the fighting genre. The big fighting game boom that happened in the 360 PS3 era, it really was kind of, you know, powered by Street Fighter 4. It was one of the catalysts. I mean, the re-release of Street Fighter 2 on the 360 arcade, along with HD Turbo Remix, led to Street Fighter 4, which led to Marvel vs. Capcom 2 getting re-released. It got Marvel vs. Capcom 3 greenlit. It inspired other fighting games to kind of like come out and be more adventurous, like Blaze Blue. Mortal Kombat 9 came back, Tekken 6. But even with like not as successful things like Street Fighter Cross Tekken, there were tons of re-releases of classic Capcom games a little later on, like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Darkstalkers and Third Strike Online. Like, it was really an amazing time to be a fighting game fan. Oversaturated? Yes, absolutely. Was the tail end of it not great with Street Fighter Cross Tekken? Absolutely. Does every game in that amazing lineup owe its existence strictly to Street Fighter 4? Not really, but maybe the general interest of the wider, more casual audience was drawn into this market because of Street Fighter 4, and it was great. It was updated for many, many years. Some say a little bit too long, but it was a great fighting game. It had something for everyone. It brought new characters, old characters, new systems, lots of costumes. It really was the center of it. And then, because of that oversaturation, things slowed down a lot. A lot of games got pulled, like Street Fighter Cross Tekken was not what people wanted it to be. Marvel vs. Capcom 3 ended support far earlier than it should have, probably due to Disney-related reasons. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure got pulled off the shop. The digital online stores due to licensing with Namco Bandai Namco. There we go. And it was slowing down. And then in 2016, we got Street Fighter V. This was going to be the shot in the arm to continue the momentum that Capcom had, that continue that Street Fighter 4 had. And quite honestly, it wasn't. It sucked. I'll say it. I bought that game at launch. In fact, I bought that game's collector's edition at launch. $100. It came with the Ryu statue. And for my $100, I got 16 characters, shoddy online, and no single player content other than like very quick little 2-fight story modes, no arcade mode. I was devastated. I played the game for like 3 hours and then just put it down for months. And I just don't want to ever see that happen again. It took, I would say, 2.5 to 3 years for me to really care about Street Fighter V. And I know I wasn't alone in this. There was many people who didn't like it for many reasons. Input delay on controllers, the fact that it wasn't on 360 or on the Xbox series of consoles, it was only on PlayStation, while Street Fighter 4 was on everything, it was on 360 and PS3. And I know that Sony helped fund Street Fighter 5, but it was still a blow. It essentially cut the community in half, and that sucked, or forced you to buy a PlayStation. And season 1 of the DLC characters brought this meager roster of 16 up to 22. But like something like you had to buy Balrog and Guile. You should never have to buy Balrog and Guile, especially Guile. Like, he should just be there. These are staple characters. Season 2 was like Akuma. That's great. You shouldn't have to buy Akuma. But like then 5 brand new characters that were revealed one at a time, which, yeah, they were great, but it still didn't feel right. And then finally, in that 3rd season, we got the arcade edition of the game, where it came with an arcade mode, a free story mode update that you could beat like in 3 hours came out, but no one plays Street Fighter for the story, and it wasn't great. But we finally got an arcade mode in Season 3, and with that, 6 new characters that really started to make this feel like a real game. The roster had increased up to 34, and it was like a brand new version of Sakura and Blanca and Cody and Sagat, and then, like Ed and Falk. Not great, but like that 3rd season is kind of where the perception of Street Fighter V started to turn around. Like, it was much better. And then what you would call Season 4, which was, we didn't hear anything for a while, but it was like Kage, and then it was Honda, Poison, and Lucia from Final Fight, and then ended with the 2 bosses, Seth and Gil. And that was great. Like, that was kind of like the best time for Street Fighter V. Like, the input lag was kind of reduced. You got crossplay between PC and PlayStation, and the online started working a bit better depending on your region. I know that like this is a hot button topic, but for me, where I live in the Northeast, it's not. I have pretty good matches with Street Fighter V, so I know if you live like in the middle of the Midwest that it's more difficult. But I can only speak to my experience. The online it felt like it was getting better. And, and then we got an extension. It felt odd. Like, there was some changes made behind the scenes at Capcom. Yoshinori Ono, the producer of Street Fighter 4 and 5, stepped down and was replaced. But we got an announcement of 5 new characters, which ended up being really 6, coming to Street Fighter 5, extending its life. And it was great. It was some fan favorites like Dan, Oro, Rose. We got 11, who's kind of a mix-it-up character. Like, he's like kind of like picking like random. And then we got a guest character from Rival Schools, Akira, which was amazing that Rival Schools was appearing in any game. And then it ended on Luke, which I did a video on. I wasn't nuts about it being Luke. I don't think they should have made us wait a year to tell us who this guy was. But it's kind of cool now in hindsight that he's leading into Street Fighter 6. But I thought it was going to be a guest character, like a true guest character. But hey, whatever. And but I must say, like, yeah, the last 2 or 3 years of Street Fighter V are great, but it never, to me, personally felt as fantastic as Street Fighter 4. Not even necessarily for gameplay reasons. It's the fact that I always knew that launch was so terrible. Like, it felt like I had a really cool car built around a terrible frame. Like it had all the bells and whistles and all these extra, like a great paint job and spinning rims and high beams, but the actual frame of the car wasn't great. And I'm not talking gameplay, I'm just talking about like the stink of that launch. Just took so long for that game, clung to that game. It took me, every time I think about it, one of the first thoughts associated with it is that terrible launch. How this game could have been so much more and so much bigger if those first 2.5 years were just better, if it just launched because, and we'll get into, a few reasons why, but I don't think it ever fully shook that stink. Street Fighter lost a little bit of its prestige, and, Street Fighter is the premier fighting game of the world. Yes, franchises like Mortal Kombat sell more per game, but that's only here in the United States. It's actually banned in Japan, and Smash Brothers is the highest selling fighting game of all time, but that's more of a best of it. That's like video games, the video game. That's beyond fighting games. And, Tekken is the premier 3D fighting game, but Street Fighter is the one that started the boom in 91. It came out in 87. These characters are iconic. It's hard not to know what a Hadouken is if you've ever played a video game. Street Fighter, and with all the great fighting games that have come over the last couple of years, Tekken 7, Samurai Showdown, Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle, Guilty Gear Strive, Mortal Kombat 11, they're all fantastic. But in many ways, even you can look at EVO, because Street Fighter is always the centerpiece of EVO. If Street Fighter isn't healthy, it feels like the FGC isn't healthy. And I know that's maybe strictly a perception of my own, but Street Fighter will always be the fighting game to many people that others that will always, all the others just take influence from, because it is no matter what fighting game is made today, it's going to have some influence from Street Fighter. And, there were fighting games before it, but Street Fighter is the one that kind of solidified what a fighting game would be for the rest of time. And I just don't want to see Street Fighter 6, getting back to our topic, turn back into this. Like I said, let's talk about what we saw real quick with Street Fighter 6. All we saw was Ryu and Luke face off in presumably the new art style. It was definitely a cutscene, but I'm guessing it's going to be somewhat indicative of what we're going to see in the game, a more realistic, fleshy, impressive look, almost like a Tekken looking. Gave me Tekken 7 vibes, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't think Street Fighter is ever going to be a 3D fighter. I think it's going to be a 2D fighter. We're not getting Street Fighter EX, whatever. It's going to be a 2.5D fighter. And all we got was that logo, that hideous, terrible logo. It's not much to go off of. But with that, I want to go through a quick list of the top 10 things that I want out of Street Fighter 6 and why I want them in comparison to Street Fighter 5's kind of failure in the beginning. So let's get through it, shall we? My Street Fighter 6 wishes. Have good online / rollback netcode. This is very important. Now, the reason why this is number 10 is I think a lot of influencers like my hero Maximilian dude and many others, they always mention that fighting games need to have good online, hence rollback netcode. And I think the industry's kind of leaning towards that with the release of King of Fighters and SNK really pushing rollback and Guilty Gear and all that. I don't think it's as important as many people think, just because and don't lynch me for this. I've talked to other fighting game guys about this, and they get really upset with me when I say it's important. It's not as important as many people think, because go on any fighting game and look at the trophy. There's always a trophy for play one online match or play one ranked match or win one ranked or any online match. It's always between 10 to maybe 20%, but I'm going to just round that off and say 15% at its very highest. That just shows you that a lot of people buy these games and not many give a shit about online. And that's fine. And yes, while the people who actually continue to play online will support the game for a very long time, that initial buy-in, that let's just say 85% of people who don't care about online, you have to cater to them a little bit too. And that's not just, they're not casual. Some people just don't want to play online, or they live in a community. I was very lucky to grow up in a neighborhood where tons of my friends to this day just played fighting games. I prefer playing them in person. Yes, I play online when I can, and I enjoy that very, very much. But some people just don't care or want to play in person or have the lucky opportunity to play with their friends. So regardless, I think that you need to have good online to increase the longevity of your game. You don't need people rage quitting or blaming that the online is bad. They'll do that anyway if they lose. I do that. But you need to have it. You need to be at least up to par with the best out there. NRS NetherRealm Studios has great netcode, and from what I played from the most recent King of Fighters and Guilty Gear Strive, very good online. It's got to be quick. It's got to be snappy. No gimmicks. Street Fighter 4 had a good setup. Just let me play training mode while I'm waiting or whatever, do trials while I'm waiting to pop into an online match or play through arcade mode even. I love that feature. Like, you were able to just go through arcade mode and get pulled into an online mode while you waited. And it's got to have them all. It's got to have ranked, casual, and rooms. I mean, I know that sounds funny, but like Dead or Alive 6 didn't launch with all that. I think it just had ranked. You got to launch with good online, not a patch later, because most people are going to be playing your game in its first month. That's just the way games are. In its first month, you must have good online with casual, ranked, and rooms. That's all. Just have it. I know it doesn't sound like much to ask, but we don't always get it, and I think that would be a great way to kind of show good faith for the competitive community in the first early days of your launch. Moving on, number 9, and I think this is more important than people think. I need Street Fighter 6 to be visually distinct. Now, the trailer that we saw did seem pretty visually distinct, very realistic, but we don't know exactly what the gameplay is going to look like yet. It's too early. That trailer could be nothing. Like, that trailer could be like super anime the game for all we know. It's probably not, but what I'm getting at is this game right here, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, often considered one of the greatest 2D fighting games or games of all time. This game was visually distinct right out of the box. Some of the smoothest 2D animation to this day. This game must have been painstaking to make. And regardless of some competitors out there like Garo and King of Fighters 12 and 13, like, this game still sticks out as one of the greatest looking games in terms of smoothness and animation of all time. It's distinct. It's memorable. Street Fighter Alpha was very anime inspired by the Street Fighter 2 anime, and it had a bright, colorful style that people just loved. Street Fighter 4, while it took some people to grow into, everyone had a distinct style. An ukiyo-e, like painter, like ink style, where every character was very thick and bulky, and it didn't look like anything else. Street Fighter 5, and Maximilian Dude has said this as well, looked very similar to Street Fighter 4 10 feet away. Yes, it looked better. It looked like there was an extra coat of paint on top of Street Fighter 4. But to someone who's just walking by, just a casual video game player, Street Fighter 4 and 5 did not look that different. Like, 5 was more clay than 4's ink, but they didn't, it wasn't like the, whoa, like that's a cool direction they went with. And not every game series needs to do that. Like, Tekken always kind of goes for like fidelity, and Guilty Gear always has like a 2D style, even though they're with the polygonal style now. But like, Guilty Gear can just look like Guilty Gear and be kind of cool. But I think Street Fighter is something that should reinvent itself every couple years visually. And Street Fighter 6, if it wants to grab that attention, it's got to look cool. It's got to look good. Now, not every fighting game needs to have top-notch graphics. SNK has proven that with some fantastic games that aren't the best looking in the world, but are fantastic. But Street Fighter is an incredible, is at the forefront of fighting games. It's not some smaller fighting game series. This is Street Fighter, the granddaddy of them all. I don't want them to go necessarily the Mortal Kombat route where it's like hyper realistic. I don't think that ages super well, because like, if you go for pure graphical fidelity without any style like Mortal Kombat does, I don't think that ages super well. Like, Mortal Kombat looks amazing. I think it's very great, but I don't know if it'll look great in 10 years because it doesn't have a look. It just looks very real. And as technology goes on, you notice those types of flaws more. But something like Street Fighter Alpha will look great for years because it looked like anime then and it looks like anime now. It got to what it was going for. So I think a stylized look is what I kind of want. I want it to pop. It can look very real, but it's got to like be hyper real. It's got to like rotoscoped or you know, it's very hard. But like, if they're going for, I hope they don't go super realistic, but I hope they go for something that pops and will look good years down the line. And I think that will grab a huge part of the casual market. Guilty Gear got huge amounts of success compared to Guilty Gear's prior installments because it looked so cool. Like, it just looks cool. Like, I want to play that game. Marvel, and this does matter because look at Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and King of Fighters 14. There's other problems with Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. But what's the first thing you notice about those games? They're ugly, particularly, and I hate to say this, King of Fighters 14 is a good fighting game. But like, Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, doesn't matter how big the IP is. That game has Spider-Man and Iron Man in it, the biggest superheroes in the world. That game is hideous. So everyone was like, ugh, like right away. It keeps everyone away. Like, when you have to like constantly be reminded of how hideous it is. King of Fighters 14, great game with a huge roster. Didn't look great, and it kept people away. It didn't pop. It didn't look like anything. So this is, in my eyes, and I could be wrong, very important. I want it to have a pop-in style that grabs people, that will look good for years to come. Number 8, the next thing I want out of Street Fighter 6, don't have auto combos. Don't dumb it down too much. Okay, what do I mean by this? Like I recently said, I love King of Fighters 15. That has auto combos, but they're actually quite hard to land, and like you have to kind of work them into your playstyle. I think it's one of the few games that did it right. Dragon Ball Fighters has auto combos, and that game's speed kind of compensates for those auto combos, but like there is a little bit too much simplicity in that. Not that I'm great at the game, I'm not, but I understand that like there's this thought that simplifying games makes them more accessible to people, but it's not. I don't think that works. Like because Maximilian Dude famously said, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is the most successful Smash Bros. Game, but it is one of the more complex ones. It is more complex than its predecessors, but it had a great look and a great roster. You don't need to simplify the gameplay to bring new people in. No one wants that because what you do is you anger the already established fans, and it doesn't draw in new fans. No one's like, oh, I did my research and this is the easiest one to play, like, so I'll jump into, like, no, they're like, that character looks cool, this game looks cool, I'll play it. That's how it works. It's not, this has the simplest controls. At least I don't think so. I want this to continue to be a 6-button fighter that doesn't have auto combos, that makes you work for them. It can have your one link frames and all that. Not to say I need it to be intimidatingly hard. It doesn't need to be like calculus Virtua Fighter on steroids, but I'd like it to retain at least the complexity that it had in prior installments. I would like to see a little bit more of the flowing gameplay that I saw in Street Fighter 3 and 4. 5 was very dialed in. I never wanted to get to like, I'm not picking on Mortal Kombat here, but Mortal Kombat has like dialed in combos. Like you have to remember, especially the older Mortal Kombats, the exact button combination. Like, and there's not too much experimentation with it. I would like kind of that. I want it to be complex and a little bit open. I don't need like set in auto combos or dial combos in Street Fighter. I think that would help make Street Fighter lose its identity. Moving on. Have an arcade mode. Like, just have single player content at launch. Like, don't give me a free update. Don't give me a paid update. Like, have an arcade mode with little openings between the characters. And, like, have some weird, if you want single player content in a Street Fighter game, you don't need, like, a Shadowfall story mode because, you play it once, you never play it again, you move on. No one plays Street Fighter for the story per se. But, like, have unique, maybe even like rotating arcade towers. Like I really like that NRS does that, like Mortal Kombat, where there's like conditions. Like, okay, this is the normal hard, ultra hard arcade ladders. Like, okay, and this one, maybe modifies. You can't throw projectiles. You can only throw projectiles. You can only play as this type of character. Or like Soul Calibur does a great job with these in Soul Calibur 2 and Soul Calibur 6 for single player modes, where there's like wacky conditions, like I said, like your character, the enemies are invisible or this or that, and by beating them, you unlock certain things which we'll get into later. But like, just have single player content that's not like a 2-fight story mode with no rounds, and have like difficulty settings and have endings at the end of those arcade modes. Like, I like that this was added in Street Fighter 5. Unlock some artwork, and if you beat it on harder difficulties, you get more artwork from different artists. Like Street Fighter 5 right now, no one even remembers this. It got an update where you can unlock so much amazing artwork in that game from numerous artists from around the world, Capcom and gaming artists. But it came so late and it was so underrepresented, no one cared. If that was in that launch, people would be playing through every character's arcade ladder with every difficulty constantly, because it's cool to unlock this stuff. I have like a cool gallery. I'm like, okay, if you beat it with Cammy, you get Cammy's music, settable music from Street Fighter 2, or you get Elena's music from Street Fighter 3. Like, have arcade modes with stuff to unlock. And like I said, that kind of goes into my number 6 and my number 5. Number 6 is rotating challenges. I like what they did with Street Fighter 5's kind of online, where like you had to like play every week and beat 4 characters. You had a week to beat them to unlock a costume. I thought that was cool. And it was always like a guest costume. It can't be just any costume. It can't be like Guile with a vest. No, it's got to be like Captain Commando. Every week you log in, and you beat a guy, and you do it 4 times, and you get a Capcom related costume. Lean into that legacy a little bit. I thought that was so sick. I'd like to see that return and be there at launch. Just give me a reason, if I'm not in the mood to go through story mode or go online, to play. Like, okay, I'll hop in, I'll beat this AI, maybe they have some wacky condition, and I will unlock a new costume. And which leads me to my number 5. Have costumes that you don't have to pay for. One thing I don't want to see in this next game are costumes that only cost money. I want you to be able to earn those costumes. You can kind of earn a lot of the costumes in Street Fighter 5, but it takes so long and so many wins online to get them. It's not worth it. It's just easier to buy them. And I know that that's the idea. Some costumes, I'd say at least half of them, you just have to buy. You can't earn them. I hate that. They're cosmetics, and I guess you don't need them, but like, come on, like, remember back in the day, like Street Fighter 4 had like a million costumes, like, yeah, pack, like Dead or Alive, Ultimate 2, you can unlock 20 costumes per character. You don't have to buy them all. So like, just have costumes to unlock right out of the gate by beating arcade mode. Go through the arcade mode on ultra hard and get a costume, I don't know, Guile's, or like a costume that looks like Remy from Street Fighter 3 or something like that. Give me a reason to unlock stuff. And I don't want the costumes to take so long to unlock that I just feel like spending $5 to buy them. I think that's absurd. So yeah, a lot of these kind of are under my number 4, fall under the umbrella of my number 4 pick. Just embrace single player. That's what my big number 4 is. I could have all made this one. I'm sorry, but as I was writing these down, I was kind of it was very freeform. Just embrace single player, because you know what? Sometimes you don't have the energy to go online. You're just playing because you like the characters, you like the legacy, you like the music, you like the backgrounds. It's a comfort food. It's a blanket. And sometimes when I came home from college and Street Fighter 4 was out, I would just play the single player because I was stressed out. I just wanted to unwind by beating up the PC. Like, it is important to remember that Street Fighter is not just about competitive play. It is about the characters. It is about that legacy. So focus on that. Give us those costumes to unlock, those legacy costumes, those new costumes. Give us things to do with these characters that we love so, so much. And that brings me to my number 3, which I think is very important. And I might get lynched over this, but don't focus so much on damn esports. I'm worried about this because the Street Fighter 6 logo is esports as hell. Street Fighter 5 did this right out of the bat. I think that's a big reason that game is rushed out. They wanted to get it on EVO on the grand stage for the pros. For people who don't necessarily care about the legacy of the characters, the stories of the characters, their look. Like, no, it's just a competition to them. It's just a job. And you know what? 99.9% of players aren't like that. Yes, it is fun to watch those players competitively, but like most people on Earth don't give a shit about that. Street Fighter 5's menu in the beginning looked like esports, like that wireframe, and it like shows the date. Like, please don't do that. Have some character. I love the Street Fighter 4 like menus. Like, there's that one menu, like the options, DJ chilling there, or like Ryu and Ken going at it. Like, have some flair for just having flair. Like, have character, have personality, have some idiosyncrasies. Don't just be like NFL or ESPN. I think that really hurts that game. Capcom games have the greatest characters in the history of gaming, some of them. From Mega Man to Dante to Street Fighter, Onimusha, Darkstalkers, Power Stone. It's hard to, like, there's so many, it's hard to name. Azura's Wrath. Like, those games are so legendary because they have personality, character, flair, style, drip, whatever you want to talk about it. Street Fighter 5 lacked that for a long, long, long time. And I want that right out of the bat. It's not an e-sport. It's a video game. And a video game is a work of art in many ways. So I want them to lean into that. Don't just like have ads thrown at me. Don't try to make it something that it's not to draw in outsiders. It is a game with characters that people love. Focus on that. And that brings me to number 2. Embrace the history of Street Fighter. Bring in characters from all over. From all eras. Have some new, yes, but don't forget, the core 8. Like, they're not gonna forget Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, Cammy, Gal, but like, it has been established that the Final Fight worlds and the Rival Schools worlds are part of the Street Fighter world. Embrace that. Have more characters from Rival Schools. I thought it was fantastic to have Akira show up. Have more characters from Final Fight. There's still some that aren't in, Street Fighter yet. You always got to have Cody Guy, but like Hagar has never showed up in a Street Fighter game. Why not have Hagar? Or like, what's his name? The electric dude from Street Fighter 3. Like Lucio was cool, like to me as a Final Fight fan. Why not have Batu from Final Fight or from Rival Schools, or Kyosuke, Daigo, or Shoma, my favorite character. Like, lean into that. Don't forget that Street Fighter does not necessarily need to stand alone. It is a Capcom game, and Capcom, to me, has some of, if not the greatest kind of catalog of characters of all time. Like, I just remembered more. Dino Crisis and Resident Evil and all these amazing games. Lean into that. I better get at least a couple more Resident Evil costumes in Street Fighter 6. And that brings me to my number one, and this seems obvious and it doesn't seem as in-depth as some of the other things I've mentioned, but it's have enough characters at launch. I've noticed this trend in the last couple of years that, like, if you don't have enough characters at launch and enough distinct characters at launch, it's gonna hurt your, it sucks. And maybe newer or smaller fighting games can get away with smaller rosters. Like the original Blaze Blue launched with like 12 characters, but it was a brand new IP, very distinct characters. So like it got away with it. But Street Fighter is not that. Street Fighter is not new and it has a catalog. Don't make us buy them all or wait forever. Launch it when it's ready. Street Fighter 4 may have been in arcades for a year before it launched, but when it launched, it had 25 characters to play. And that's the bare minimum. That is the bare minimum. It had 25 fantastic characters to play. Street Fighter 5 had 16. That's unacceptable. That is less than Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo if you count Akuma, a game from 1994. That is not acceptable for the largest fighting game or the most prestigious fighting game IP on the planet, and it does matter. And you know, like, I love Guilty Gear Strive. I've talked about it in a prior video, but like 15 characters at launch, yeah, you know, you get a little tired of seeing the same characters online all the time. And yes, they are distinct and the new characters are fantastic. But like I kind of put it down and I'm like, I'm going to wait until season 1 is done to jump back in so there's more variety. Or Dragon Ball FighterZ, an amazing fighting game, but it's a 3-on-3 fighting game with only 21 characters. So it didn't have a ton of combinations. So like the first couple of weeks, months, even year, you saw the same characters over and over and over again. And for me personally, that kind of like gets you. I like when I hop into a single player mode online, like, oh, they're using some of like a character that isn't used a lot. It's not cool. And like Street Fighter in particular, like it's this huge family of characters and it's great to see them come back. And don't make us pay for them. Like, I'm going to go through a list of the characters, dream list of who I think should be there at launch. And I'm just going to say there should be 25 characters. I really don't think Street Fighter has an excuse to have less. Like I said, this is the premier fighting game. They don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. So let's go with it matching the number of characters that they had in the game they launched in 2008. Street Fighter 4 with 25 characters. So I think you have to have the original 8 Street Fighters right off the bat. You have to have Ryu, Ken, Chun-Li, Guile, Dalsim, Zangief, Blanca, and E-Honda. You must have them right off the bat. These 8 are the most famous fighting game characters in the world, or at least amongst them, because they were the Street Fighter 2 cast. They are the ones that blew arcades up in 1991, inspired Mortal Kombat and Killer Instinct and all those other characters, all those other games. And the idea that in Street Fighter 5 you had to pay money to get Guile and you had to wait 5 years to get Honda is insane to me. Street Fighter 4 launched with all the core 8 characters. They are, and that's the way to do it. Ryu and Ken, obviously similar, but they've been differentiated throughout the years. Each one of those characters has a different play style and is a core play style that appeals to somebody. Are you a grappler? You're Zangief. Are you a zoner? You're Ryu or Ken? Or, you know, are you charge character? You had Blanca. You had Honda. You know, each one of them was basically distinct and weird and are iconic, and you should not have to wait or pay for them for these base characters that should be in every Street Fighter. My next one, well, let me stick with that. I think if you had to cut some of the older characters, you could cut the bosses. Bison canonically has been killed like 8 times, so if you have to kill Bison for now, you can bring him back later. Same with like Vega, Balrog, and even Sagat. I think I would like Sagat to be there because he's kind of redeemed himself and he's the first Street Fighter boss, but I'm trying to keep this list a little tight. So let's just say at launch, the 4 Heavenly Kings aren't there because they've been so defeated and Sagat's like training with a tiger in the mountain. I think number 9, you have to have Cammy. Cammy is, I'd say, on the same level as Chun-Li, as the most famous female fighting game characters. I think it's pretty much Chun-Li and Cammy. I mean, she's in Fortnite. And it'd feel weird if she wasn't there. My main and many in Street Fighter 4, so, you know, I want her there personally. There's not too many fast, quick characters in those original 8, so, like, she kind of fits that mold. I'd like to see her there. 10, sticking with Street Fighter 2, I think the return of Fei Long would be fantastic. Fei Long was not in Street Fighter 5, pretty beloved character. I would love to see him come back, but be like a little older. I think his playstyle is pretty unique. Like, he was like the only Rekka character out of the original Street Fighter 2 cast. Like, you know, Rekka kind of comes from him. and the flame kick is just so cool. We haven't seen him in a couple of years, so bring Fei Long back. That means, of course, cutting the other two super characters, DJ and T-Hawk, but what are you going to do? They can come back later. Moving on to Alpha, I think you have to have Sakura. I think Sakura is one of the most popular characters in Street Fighter for many reasons, and not for like creepy otaku like reasons, but she's just cool. Like, I like Sakura. I would love if Sakura was the main character of like a Street Fighter game. Like, think about it. Sakura, I don't think, has had any formal training in the Street Fighter universe, but she can just throw an energy ball and do a Shoryuken like on her own by just watching Ryu. Imagine if she was trained. Like, imagine like Akuma realized like that child can just throw an energy blast with no training. She has more potential than Ryu. Or like she became the hero. Like, she actually put her mind to it and decided. Like, that'd be so cool if we had like it's risky because, you know, female characters are never, like, I don't think there's ever been a main character that's a female in a fighting game off the top of my head. Maybe Kasumi from Dead or Alive, but, you know, but for Street Fighter, it's always been a male. Like, I thought if Sakura was the main character, that'd be so sick. Like, she's like in her mid to late 20s now, and she's just like badass, and like her potential isn't quite there, but she's almost like, she's just, oh man. So you gotta have Sakura. Super popular, great appearance in Street Fighter V, but you can't get rid of her. She represents a huge part of Street Fighter fandom. I think you should have Dan. I always think you should have Dan, because here's the thing. Do you want to pay for Dan again? I don't think you should have to pay for Dan. You gotta have a joke character. You gotta have some levity. Capcom is well known for having some goofiness in their games, and who better than Dan Hibiki, the guy who's still to this day making fun of SNK. I just think he's the best character that you pick to kind of style on your friends. Like, okay, be your best and I'll beat you with Dan. Just throw him in there. Think you got to have Dan. So hang me up if you have to. But moving on, I think that if you're going to, you know, the Final Fight characters were brought in during the Alpha's days, I think you should finally have Hagar in a Street Fighter game. Hagar has appeared in Marvel vs. Capcom, but he's never appeared properly in a Street Fighter. Cody, Guy, Zeku, Lucia, they've all appeared there. Poison, Hugo, these are all Final Fight characters, but you don't have Hagar, the guy who's playable in all three Final Fights. And it would be great to just see him and Zangief finally go at it. Differentiate their playstyles a little bit. Maybe Guy, like Hagar, I don't know, he uses a pipe or he's quicker or slower than Zangief, but it'd be great to just have the mayor of Metro City finally come in, because he's the biggest character from Final Fight that has not been in a Street Fighter, and people love Final Fight. I love Final Fight. Throw him in there. Next character is jumping over to the third strike. It's time for Elena to come back. She got shafted in Street Fighter 4 because she came back in super late in Ultra. So people like barely remember. Like, she was really good in that game, but I feel like a lot of people forget she was in that. She's one of the coolest characters in Street Fighter 3. She's my main in Street Fighter 3. You have to have, I think, Elena come back. Who knows? Maybe change up her, give her an alternate costume. I love her base costume, but like, who knows what 10 years have done to her? Maybe she's got like longer hair or something. I don't know. You know, she's out of high school. I would love to see Elena come back. And of course, you got to have the other schoolgirl with her. You got to have Makoto. Makoto, great pick in Street Fighter 3 and 4, absent from Street Fighter 5. Come back, see her as a grown woman. Maybe she's the head of her dojo. She hits harder, kind of grounded, up-close play style. Fan favorite. Have her as a rival with Sakura. Just, yeah, bring on Makoto, another fan favorite. And a character, the last character I'll talk, well, last character to talk about from Third Strike for a second, coming back, who's absent in 5, fan favorite Dudley. Come on, if you're not going to have Balrog, you got to have at least one boxer. And who's everyone's favorite dandy boxer? It's Dudley. I think he's one of the most fun and funny and cool characters in the series. I think you got to throw Dudley in there. And I don't know, maybe he's getting older. Maybe he's more like Mickey from Rocky. He's like, you know, or like Apollo Creed. Like, he's just getting a little older, but he's still got it. That's what I would love to see from Dudley. And he's got to throw the rose. Yet again, a funny, cool character and fun to play. Oh, how dare I forget. You know, jumping back to Super Street Fighter 2, you got to have Akuma. Don't make me buy Akuma. Akuma has to be there. He's like, I guess you can call him a villain. Not really, but let's say he's like one of the most popular Street Fighter characters, the most powerful Street Fighter character canonically, I believe. I still say he's stronger than Gil. Forget it. Have him come back. Have him look like, getting him even closer to looking like Oni. I didn't like that big Lions, man. I don't know. Throwing in Azura's Wrath costume. You got to have Akuma. Yes, that's a lot of Shotos, but the fact of the matter is Akuma is very different than the other Shotos. I think Street Fighter V did a great job of making Ryu, Ken, Dan, Sakura, and Akuma play all vastly differently. Got to have Akuma. He's an icon. He's a mascot. Keep him in there. But jumping back to the Third Strike characters, one more Shoto, but this one's a little different. Hear me out here. You got to have Sean. Sean was heavily hinted at in Street Fighter V with his older sister, who doesn't look a damn thing like him. Laura, I think Sean, he's been gone for a few games. He's a great pick. There's a huge fighting game community in Brazil. Got to have some more Brazilian representation. Bring him back, but make him like a real fighter, somewhere like better than Dan, but maybe not as good as like Ken, or maybe he is good, but he's got like a more athletic style. Incorporate the basketballs and the flip kicks, less Hadouken. Like maybe his whole thing is like he's a Shoto who focuses more on his feet. Like his like kind of Ryu's bread and butter is the Hadouken, and Ken's is the Shoryuken. But maybe the Tatsumaki, the spin kick, the hurricane kick, if you will, is kind of like Sean's bread and butter. I think that would be really cool to have him come back. Gotta have that yellow gi. So let's throw Sean in there. And then we're going to have Jury from Street Fighter 4. Out of the new Street Fighter 4 characters, like you had Seth as the boss and Goken, who I love, but I don't think I would love to see him come back. I don't think he will. Abel and Rufus and Sea Viper and El Fuerte and Hakan and Jury, the Street Fighter 4 era characters. Jury's the fan favorite. You got to have a bad girl. She's a Taekwondo, good for Korean representation, good for, like, there's not many female villains, good Taekwondo representation. She's just cool. Jury is a fan favorite. She was done dirty in Street Fighter 5. She was always at the bottom of the tier. She didn't play anything. She wasn't fun to play as like she was in Street Fighter 4. So bring her back in an incarnation closer to Street Fighter 4. Keep her evil. Don't make her completely good. Keep her at least like kind of like toeing that line. And everyone loves Jury. Bring her back. And then jumping on the Street Fighter 5 cast, Street Fighter 5 had a ton of new characters, some hits, some misses, but out of the launch roster, I think Rashid and Laura were the favorites. No one likes Fong or Fang, however you say it. And, Nikali was a waste of time, just generally a waste of time. Built as the villain, never became the villain, got beaten in the story mode, just disappeared. I think Rashid and Laura were both fun, unique play styles. There's not many wind fighters. Like there was no other wind manipulator in Street Fighter 5. You have some representation there as well. I would like his outfit to be a little cooler than what he's been giving. I never liked that. Like he had like a very old, like different type of gear. Almost, I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan. It wasn't flashy. I would like to see him kind of have a different costume, but come back and, just continue to be himself because Rashid had a cool playstyle. Laura, sex appeal is everything. Like I said, huge fan favorite. Very cool. Electric grappler, like a unique playstyle, like a grappler that's not slow with like a flair. And of course, like I said, the sex appeal that always does well. She was just cool though. Bring Laura and Rashid back along with the only DLC Street Fighter 5 character I would like to see is Minot. Minot, yet again, very cool character. Sex appeal is there. Let's say Rose isn't in this launch roster. You have to have like a weird fighting style. Like Minot had a very unique fighting style. Bring her back, make her seem a little bit older. You get some, like I said, more representation, like, a diverse cast. She was someone who stuck out not just because of her looks, but because she was like a wild character in terms of style. So yeah, definitely bring back Minot. And then, okay, it looks like Luke's already in. So let's bring back Luke. It looks like he's going to be kind of like the Alex of Street Fighter 5 or 6 and be like the new like kind of story main character like Alex was for Street Fighter 3. And then I say your last three, that brings us to 22. Your last couple characters, just make them new characters. You only really need 2 or 3 new ones to kind of draw people in because, people are going to want to play as their favorites mostly. And I think Guilty Gear Strive did a good job. Like of its launch 15, only 2 were new, but they were good. It was Giovanna and it was Nago Ryuki. Both are awesome. So, like, you don't need a lot of new characters. They just need to be good. Because, like, Guilty Gear XR's new characters were, like, stupid. Like, Bedman and Raven and Kom Hayan, whatever, the robot girl. Like, I'm sorry if they're your favorites, but, like, I like what Strive did where they were cool. King of Fighters 14 also had this issue where there were a ton of characters, but a lot of the new ones were terrible. Like, Xanadu and, like, the Pachinko girls, like Moi Moi and Love Heart. And other terrible characters like Sylvie Paula. No, if you're going to add new characters, go for quality over quantity. I would take two or three brand new good characters over a couple trash ones. Soul Calibur 3, great additions like Tira, Zasamel, and Setsuka. That was just 3 new characters, but that really, just because they were good, changed the flavor of the game. And then all your favorite brand new your old school characters. Like I think what I picked here would satisfy most old school fans. And for your DLC, of course, there has to be some, right? We wanted to have Street Fighter 5 will end with 46 characters because they had to have more than Street Fighter 4's 44. Eventually, yeah, I want it to be bigger, but I would like to see is kind of something that they've done with King of Fighters, where they're like themed, right? Like, and I prefer when you know the DLC characters ahead of time. I don't like like maybe they can announce a few like half and half, but I don't like when they give you the option of buy a season pass, but you don't know who's in it. I mean, Smash Brothers did it and it got away with it, but I don't think that's always right. I think there's like a good balance where, like, let's say you announce, like, for season 1 of King of Fighters, there's going to be 12 characters announced, and they gave you 6 right off the bat. Maybe something like that. If there's going to be 6 characters, give us the first 3. And then the second half of the year when they're coming out, give us the second 3. So we at least know what we're buying. But I would like them to be themed. Like Pack 1 would be Final Fight characters. Like I only put Hagar in that base roster. Make a Final Fight themed DLC. Like the first 3 will be, I don't know, Cody, Guy, and Lucia or Zeku or whoever. Like, like a Metro City pack. And Pack 2 would be rival schools. Put like, Batu, Kyosuke, and Hinata in there. And keep that kind of going, and have a third strike thing where you have Yun, Yang, and Remy, or an alpha. Like I would like them to kind of stick to those themes, because season 2 of Street Fighter V is kind of like new characters, but the rest were just kind of all over the place. I like how King of Fighters has like season 1 is Team Garo, which is all characters from Garo Mark of the Wolves, and season 2 is like Team Southtown, Fatal Fury characters. Villains in particular. So that's kind of what I would like to see in Street Fighter 6, how I would like it to work with the characters. Maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. I know a lot of you are steamed at what I've just said. So please tell me, who would you like to see in the roster before I go any further? And yeah, that's a lot. I know I've just rambled on way longer than I thought. This video is going to be longer than I thought, but I love Street Fighter. I love Capcom. And fighting game, and I can't wait to see what they're going to do. And right now, I keep mentioning it, I'm enjoying this game a hell of a lot, King of Fighters 15. I think this is going to be one of the fighting games to beat this year in terms of what it launched with. If Street Fighter 6 can come out with half the content that this game has, because I think King of Fighters 15 was trying to apologize for King of Fighters 14. So what did this do? This launched with a big roster, smaller than 14, but still big for most modern fighting. 39 characters. Good online, like rollback netcode, unlockables in the terms of artwork and music, and very cool new characters like Dolores and Isla. Cool enough characters, and tons of fantastic returners like K49 or Cronin, whatever he's called now. Team Orochi came back, and great DLC coming down the line that seems to be worth it. A new look, like King of Fighters 14 was ugly. This game decided to pretty itself up. It's not the best technically looking, but stylistically it looks great. I would like Street Fighter 6 to take a lot of hints from this. Kind of apologize to us for the terrible launch of Street Fighter 5 and come back and right all those wrongs and pay attention to what your competition is doing. Because Street Fighter will always be popular. There's power in that name, in that brand. But I would like the actual core games that these characters originate from to continue to be as good as they are, because Street Fighter means so much to me. I mean, I grew up playing Marvel vs. Capcom the most, but Street Fighter 2 was always just around. And as I got more into high school and college, Street Fighter 3, and then in college, Street Fighter 4 changed my life. I made so many friends just through the fighting game community, like lifelong friends that I still play these games with today. So Street Fighter, I keep near and dear to my heart. Street Fighter 2 revolutionized the industry in 91. Street Fighter 3 became the greatest cult hit comeback in the history of fighting games on a technical level. And Street Fighter 4 revived the industry back in 2009. And Street Fighter 5, I think it'll be remembered as the game that turned it around but didn't have the impact of its predecessors in any way. I want to see what Street Fighter 6 does. Is Street Fighter 6 going to be the game that brings that legacy back? Goes, wow, no, that's the best fighting game of this generation, or that brought in a ton of new people, or that's the best looking. What will Street Fighter 6 needs to be something special. It can't just be another fighting game that Capcom throws out there. It has to live up, in my eyes, or at least I hope it lives up to the pedigree that its predecessors have laid forth. I want that because I love these games forever. These characters are burned into my soul. I have more fond memories playing fighting games, Street Fighter in particular, than any other fighting game franchise, any other video game franchise. And I just want that series to be healthy so us fans are happy. I just want you'll never get everyone saying it's great, but I don't want people always going, oh, 5 is better, 4 is better. I would like the majority of people to say, you know what, 6 is pretty damn good. That's all I want it to be. Pretty damn good. Maybe that's too much to ask. And that brings me to the end of the video, guys. Yeah, thank you for listening to me talk about this, because as you can tell, I'm still very excited, very hyped on these two releases, the Capcom Fighting Collection and Street Fighter 6. And let me know, are you hyped? What do you think of this? Do you like the way it was announced? Is it not enough to go on, like I mentioned earlier? Who would you like to see appear in these games? That's the number one thing. Those are the two big questions. Number one is, who do you want in this game? What do you want the roster to be? And number two, what do you want it to look like? Let me know, what would you like to see change and what would you like to see not change? And I'm going to respond to you as quickly as I can, because I really do love what you guys have been kind of asking and informing me on in my prior videos. So as always, my name is Mike. This has been Chip Damage, and please take care of yourselves.